When you have feelings for someone and you're trying to understand what their intentions are and you feel confused by the signals they're giving you, do you ever feel like you have to pretend everything's clear and that you're okay with it? That's a trauma thing. And what it leads to, unfortunately, is an inability to discern whether a person or situation is a good choice for you or a harmful choice. So I want to talk to you about how we lose our ability of discernment in order to tell good from bad and how we can heal it. So growing up with abuse and neglect can give you a habit. It's a pattern of behavior where it can get you into ambiguous relationships where you're terrified of expressing how you feel or what your expectations are, and you're afraid to ask where this person is coming from. And if you're like a lot of people with childhood PTSD, you've had relationships go on for months or even years where you're in some kind of a gray zone, kind of hiding how you feel and suffering in silence because you're not getting what you want. Has that happened to you? It's understandable why someone with a history of neglect or abuse in their past would do that. It's self-protection. So people won't get mad, right? So they won't leave you, so they don't make you feel foolish for misreading their intentions. But it's a terrible way to have relationships, especially when what you really want is to be truly loved. So unfortunately, confusion is one of those side effects of early trauma that feeds on itself and ends up winding its way into your whole way of thinking and being. And this can go on so long that you can't remember anymore how you really feel versus, how you pretend you feel. You tell yourself you're okay with fuzzy lines around the relationship. You're okay with them sleeping with other people. You're okay with being just friends after a breakup. And when you're actually in love with them, in reality, you're going against the truth of how you feel, and you're undermining yourself and almost guaranteeing that you won't find the love you need. And this happens because you get so used to feeling off balance and having to guess what people around you are feeling that you lose your ordinary powers of perception to read reality accurately. So for example, you might be in a relationship that you thought was serious, but then you find out the other person thinks of you as, just kind of a casual thing. And how that really feels is a crushing blow. It's just massive. There's so much hurt and disappointment in that. But instead of pulling away, you force yourself to abandon how you feel, to pretend you're fine, to convince yourself that you should be fine with the arrangement. Or you might feel excited about a new person you've met and you're having lunch and you're pretty sure it's a date, and then you realize they're just trying to sell you a nutritional supplement or something, some pyramid scheme. So you feel shocked and disappointed, but you try to hide it and you pretend, you knew it wasn't a date. Of course, yes, I knew it wasn't a date. And even then you go farther and maybe pretend that you're interested in their sales pitch just to save face. Maybe you buy something. You don't want to look foolish, right? Somehow it feels shameful to have hoped for more in a relationship. But why? If you do this in the dating arena, I wouldn't be surprised if you also do this at work. So let's say your boss promised a raise by a certain date, but then nothing happens and nothing is said about it. Do you speak up and remind your boss, or do you pretend that this was never discussed or promised and stay silent? Or worse, you become self-critical for understanding the original promise wrong, or you imagine that you must have done something wrong to change the boss's mind. So you decide to pretend the raise was never promised. You stay for years in grudging silence that has, a vague cloud of shame around it. You don't even know. I think I did something wrong. Also, I hate him. These are the kinds of dilemmas that rise up in your life when you're not confident in your own discernment, when you have no clarity. And I'm going to talk about how that plays out and what to look for, and then I'm going to tell you what to do. So when you were a kid and you got mistreated, one of your coping mechanisms might have been to just go into a fog of denial. So let's say you witnessed a violent argument in the house, and then everyone pretended that it never happened. So you pretended too, right? This fog of denial, it probably helped you at the time to tolerate the horrible implications of what you actually saw. and it helped you carry on with your little kid life, having friends, going to school. Your skill in blocking this out was incredibly valuable because chances are, if there was violence one time, there was probably violence a lot of times. You were dealing with a lot. There was a lot you couldn't afford to let in to your consciousness. But now you're an adult, and the fog of denial is still one of your reactions to stressful experiences. If you're still responding to mistreatment, instability, anxiety, danger, by blanking out and pretending everything's fine, you've missed a lifetime of experience learning to speak up for yourself, to say something about things that hurt you, to set boundaries, to ask questions. Hands down, this behavior that passes as being nice or easygoing is not nice, and it's not easy. Being foggy is a vulnerable state where your childhood PTSD behaviors can get worse. The clinging, the obsessing, the people-pleasing, the crap-fitting, where you fit yourself to unacceptable situations or people. That's crap-fitting in crappy childhood fairy lingo. It all makes it possible because every time you think of leaving, it's as if a switch flips in your mind and you lose your will. You lose your discernment about what actions would be best. You stay paralyzed and in a fog. You probably blame yourself. And it's okay, actually, that you developed this survival strategy. It helped you get through painful experiences with your spirit still intact. Good job. You did well. That's how traumatized kids survive. But now, as an adult, if you still don't have a clear awareness of who you are and what you want, what it's fair to expect of other people, and whether they should even be in your life, you're on a path toward pain and emptiness. So without clarity and discernment, your life fills up with things you never wanted. So it's time to heal from the past and to find your way forward to happiness, to love, to fulfillment. So I'm going to tell you what you can do to dissolve that fog and develop in its place discernment. So think for a minute about times in the past when you were not clear. One sign that you weren't clear would be when you got broadsided by reality. So let's say you find out someone you're dating is lying to you about who they are and how they spend their time. And once you find out, you're like, I knew it. I thought something sounded wrong, but I ignored the red flag. That's you having good information but not being clear. You didn't trust your judgment. Maybe you weren't in a position to trust your judgment because trauma was in the way. But so you went into that nice, cozy fog where you could have a little more time in the relationship that you hoped it was going to turn out to be. And then not only do you find out that the red flags you saw and ignored were actually real, but you realize that this was probably obvious to everyone else in your life. And in fact, they were probably telling you, hey, this person you're crazy about, I don't know, I got a feeling about them. And what the person who's in a fog of denial is likely to do in that case is not break up with the boyfriend or girlfriend who's throwing up red flags. It's to block out the friends who see the red flags. And that further isolates you. And isolation is the perfect atmosphere for denial to spread and just take over your life. So that's how so many people with trauma find themselves stuck in intolerable situations. And the good news is, no matter how long this has gone on, you can change. It is noble work to try to face your own problems. And it's not always easy to do. It feels sometimes like the shame is going to kill you, like the loneliness is too much, and you need to go back to the bad situation. You'll be tempted to run from yourself and hide from reality and blame the people who believe in you being capable of something better. But remember, this is your trauma brain thinking. Your trauma brain believes that if you see your own flaws, it will destroy you. But that's not true. It's a normal perception for a person with a history of abuse and neglect. You very rightly became terrified of criticism when you were a kid. But we all know people who simply cannot take responsibility for their mistakes, and you see how that goes. There's a loving way to view whatever it is you chose or did or didn't do. It was never your fault that you have childhood PTSD. And it's normal for traumatized people to struggle in exactly this way. And now you get to begin your healing. So where do you start? Maybe you have trouble recognizing danger or feeling love or knowing when you've worn out your welcome and it's time to get up from your friend's table and say goodnight. When you begin gently to come back to your life and take stock of it, you will begin to learn ways to handle that differently, to read the room, to know the cue, to have discernment. Or you might have a tendency to block out a painful truth with something that you think explains it away. Like maybe someone you've been dating says they feel like the relationship needs to end. But instead of feeling the pain of rejection, you get busy researching mental health conditions that could explain why they want to leave you, and you start pushing books on them and trying to help them. People with complex PTSD often go into helper mode when their security feels threatened. You're not crazy. That instinct to stay unclear about reality, again, it's a survival strategy from the past. It started when you were small. You learned to play along with mistreatment or the shady behavior of grown-ups in your life because from a very early age, you instinctively knew if you spoke up, you'd be hurt. You knew that if you told anyone what was really going on, they would ostracize you or even take you away from your family. For a child, that is an existential threat. And that's why denial has such grabby claws in it. It holds on. It takes real strength and courage to come out of a fog and to face all the years you suffered, all the opportunities you lost, because you couldn't see very clearly yet what was going on. So it's tempting to put off facing what's real. But the longer you do, the more of your precious time on earth is lost to you. And when you don't become who you really are, we're all deprived of the gifts that you were meant to bring to the world. Everyone is only waiting for the good, real person you are to heal and come forward and take your place in the world. So where do you begin to develop discernment? You can begin with the relationships now in your life. The job is to learn which people are good for you to associate with and which ones have red flags all around them. To list and understand the junctures in your life where you made choices, either positive or destructive, that got you where you are right now. And I know from my own healing years how hard it can seem to look at yourself honestly in these moments. There really is temptation to slip back into the fog, but everything depends on being here in clarity. Clarity feels good. It feels clean. It feels peaceful. It feels true. And a lot of stress falls away, even when the truth you're facing is that you need to leave a relationship or two. So some of what you'll face is how you were mistreated. But you'll also see how sometimes you played a role in this by convincing yourself, oh, it's probably just me. It's my fault. And you know what? Sometimes, well, it might have been just you. I know it was me sometimes. Sometimes we are unreasonable. Sometimes we're the ones who need to work on ourselves, because we were neglectful or hurtful or even abusive. So knowing this about yourself will hurt you whether you face it or not. But when you face it, you can heal it. And when the denial is gone, what's left is this wonderful power of discernment. What is good? What is bad? Discernment means good judgment. It means being able to tell right from wrong. When is it just me? When should I get the heck away from someone? And there are two skills that will accelerate your powers of discernment. They're very simple, but probably rusty if you've been living in a fog. One is to tell the truth. You've got to be honest with yourself and with other people, even when it will mess up your plans, and even when it will break the spell that you were enjoying when you were pretending that you were cool with everything. I'm cool, it's fine, but then suffering in silence. The second is to ask questions. When you're confused by something another person says or does, you ask for clarification. Like, have you ever been invited to a restaurant, but you were nervous the whole time because you didn't know if it was a date? Or you didn't know if the person who invited you meant to pay for you or not? Has this kind of ambiguous situation shown up in your life, maybe over and over again? Or were you flirting with someone who turned out to be unavailable and you knew that it was inappropriate, but you were afraid if you said something it would ruin the moment and you would never have any fun again in your life? You know what you can do? You can just say out loud what's going on, or you can ask. You can say, this is weird. It feels like things are getting a bit flirty here. Or you can say, hey, when you invited me out, were you planning to treat or should I plan to pay for myself? Or you can say, I'd love to go to dinner, but before I say yes, I hope you won't mind my asking, is this a date? And it feels so embarrassing to ask the question or state the obvious, but you know what's so great about it? There's no more confusion. There's no more pretending and suffering in silence. You know where you stand. Whatever the situation is can be made clear to you, and you can proceed accordingly. So how many times did you hide your feelings, not ask the question, or put up with crappy treatment and assume it's just me? I just want you to think about this. If you were ever in a relationship where things turned out not to be what you thought, would it have changed things if you blurted out the truth of what you were noticing way back when you first noticed it? Saying the truth really kills the romance sometimes. And that's what we want, because if truth ruins everything, something was already seriously not right. So speaking up early is how you can clear up limerent relationships that are made up almost entirely of longing, when you're pining away for someone who's very happy to keep things ambiguous and enjoy all that flirty energy from you. They feed off it. And for you, you're basically just bleeding it out. That flirty energy, that's your life force that you're giving away. It's embarrassing to get rejected when you ask about that, but it's not nearly as hard as all the time and pain of getting over it, when you've hung in there for a long time. You don't want to build your life around somebody who's unavailable, who's just basking in the sunshine of your unconfessed love year after year. So it's called disclosing in limerence. You disclose, this is how I feel. Is that how you feel? And this is what I mean when I tell you, you got to be honest. So if you're going to heal your perception and take on this project of courageous honesty, it helps to have at least one person to whom you can pour out your heart and who you can really trust to be both kind and real with you about what they see from the outside, and who will be supportive of you taking steps towards doing things in a better way. And this isn't always something that you can get from friends, because they're either too hard on you or too easy on you. Or they just don't even get it. They don't relate to problems like this. And in any case, that's not going to be helpful. It's not uncommon for traumatized people to have no friends that they could ask for this kind of support. And so healing starts there, to create a support system of friends. It could be a therapist if that's been helpful to you. It could be a 12-step group. You don't have to have established friendships or know how to do friendships. Meetings occur and you show up at the scheduled time. And you will find there other people who are changing their lives in similar ways that you're trying to do. Or you can do it through online courses and through coaching with teachers like me. Before you start dating, it is so important to have a clear vision for the kind of person that you want to be with and how you want that relationship to be. Now, this is the step that so many people skip, especially people who were emotionally neglected as children. It's like it's almost impossible for us before healing to imagine it or to imagine having what we want. So we set our bar very low. The clearer that you can be about the characteristics of a good partner, and the more carefully you can honor what is most important to you in a mate, the easier it will be to avoid heartbreak and entanglement that make the road to true love take so long and be so depleting and destructive. So these are 12 signs. I list them here. They may sound like no-brainers, but if you're honest with yourself, when you first met somebody, you probably noticed this missing and you didn't do anything about it. That's happened to most of us. And then you paid the price. But here they are. These are the 12 things to look for when you first meet somebody. All right, number one is you feel romantically attracted to them. And they show you in a big or a small way that they're attracted to you. So this could be the small ways, and you won't always know if you're reading signs correctly, but either they seek out a conversation with you, or when you do talk to them, they seem happy to talk. They make eye contact, they smile, they act interested in what you say, and they put a little effort into keeping the conversation going. Number two is they're not already in a relationship. Now, clarifying this with someone that you've just met is a gentle way, it's totally accepted culturally, to just let them know you're interested. It's not overstepping, and you get to save face in case they are in a relationship. So if you say, how interesting what you just said. So are you in a relationship? And in case they say, yes, actually, I have a girlfriend and she's right over there, You can quietly change your intentions without feeling embarrassed. And now you have your answer. Yes, they're in a relationship. Number 3 is they will clarify whether a get-together is a date. So let's say they show signs of interest. They're not in a relationship, and one of you suggests getting together sometime. If you are in doubt about whether they mean for it to be a date, your mission is to get that clear, ideally before the first date. Now, if you still don't have clarity, don't agree to a second get-together until the date or not question has been clarified. And I know what you're thinking, can't we just be friends if that's what they want? And you can, but I only recommend that you stay just friends with them if you're not attracted to them. Hanging out with someone you like romantically who is not into you drains your emotional energy and dims your emotional availability for someone who is into you. This is number 4. They demonstrate an interest in getting to know you. They don't just talk about themselves, or they don't just try to impress you or talk about outside things like the news or the weather. They ask you about you. And anyone who's healthy and looking to be in a relationship will have that as their number 1 goal for a date. They want to get to know you. Number 5 is they listen to what you say. They understand you. They get you. Not everybody gets you, but this is what is important in somebody if you're going to date them. They have a conversation with you about what you said, and it's not just taking turns asking and answering questions, right? They're listening. Number 6 is they make it clear that they are interested in you. They don't leave you guessing for long. There are circumstances where it's okay, even though it's awkward, to get to know someone through 1 or 2 or at most 3 get-togethers. And if you find yourself falling for them but afraid to ask, if it's mutual and you've been hanging out with them for a while, the answer is probably that they're not interested. And you're avoiding the question because either you know the answer or you fear the answer is no. But be courageous on this one. Healthy people like to get this clear, and I encourage you to do it too, so that you don't waste your lovely romantic possibilities waiting around in a nervous place of limbo. Number 7 is they're open about themselves and what they're looking for. And it could be a red flag if they jump right in to tell you tragic stories or rants about their ex that screwed them over. And this would mean they're in healing mode and not quite ready. So your job is to get a sense of what is their vision for their life. Do they want marriage? Are they interested in having a serious relationship? Do they have children? Do they want to have children in the future? These are major compatibility factors that you should know no later than the 3rd date. Number 8 is they are logistically available, and that means they live in the same general area as you. They have time for a relationship. They don't have anything in their life that would get in the way of forming a commitment. And I'm talking about things like an ex who's living in their basement, or a job that keeps them out of town most of the time, or they're about to move to another country. Number 9 is they treat you and everyone else really well. And this includes food servers, other drivers, people who bump into them on the street, animals whose leash gets underfoot. They are gentle and they're kind and respectful. So you're watching for this. If they can't be in those circumstances, they would not make a good partner. Number 10, they're honest. And if they notice the restaurant forgot to charge for the dessert, they tell the restaurant. If you ask them a question about themselves, they answer. They don't try to keep you from looking under the hood to find out what's really going on with them. Number 11, they are considerate about making plans with you. They make it clear when a plan is firm, they show up when they say they will show up, and they call when they say they'll call. They never leave you guessing about whether something they invited you to do was an invitation or just a random idea. If plans have to change, they tell you right away. Number 12, you feel good when you're around them. You feel good, not just because love is exciting, and not just because there's hope that loneliness will be gone from your life this weekend. These are legitimate reasons to feel good, but it's not enough just to feel attracted or crazy about them or glad to have a date. By itself, this is not a sign. The sign is that as a result of meeting them and spending time with them, you feel lifted up. You find yourself feeling good about yourself, like you want to be more and do more in your life. in a way that's healthy and positive and fulfilling, that's a sign that someone is a good match for you. And ideally, they'd have this lifted up feeling from being around you too. So having a good relationship is something that can come to you as your trauma heals. And it helps to have clarity about what you want and a community of people who understand and support you in making positive changes in your dating life and good tools that help you face and heal the trauma wounds that have gotten in your way in the past. People who had a traumatic childhood can be very difficult to be in a relationship or marriage with. I get a lot of letters from hurt, scared people who are going through a lot of pain because their partner has CPTSD and is not yet able to calm their symptoms. Now, do I think people with CPTSD are always worth being with? No, not always. But great relationships are possible when you both understand what CPTSD is and you're both working on strategies to halt the hurtful and chaotic dynamics that can very easily pull couples into a dark vortex. With knowledge and goodwill, healing can be totally positive for both people. And can I just say this to the people who do choose to love people with CPTSD? I love you for this. I'm grateful to those of you who care enough to ask how to be a good partner to those of us who are affected by hard stuff in childhood. A loving and stable relationship goes a long way to help heal human beings who are hurt and feeling alone. So thank you for that. All right. I first just want to acknowledge that the symptoms of childhood PTSD are on a continuum. They come and go. They might be little things and they could be very serious things. And before I get into the nuts and bolts of how to be with someone who's having these symptoms, I just want to say, under no circumstances should you put up with abuse. And I'll get into that a little more at the end. But yes, people who had a hard childhood are totally worthy and lovable and can be worth a bit of trouble sometimes. And yes, we can be complicated and confusing and needy and exasperated sometimes, but also wise and capable and warm. So here are some tips to help you understand your loved one and offer support while also taking care of yourself, because there is no good relationship where people don't take care of themselves. So first of all, it may be helpful to know that a lot of what your partner is dealing with is called dysregulation. This is a real and measurable nervous system phenomena that can cause a person to feel, spaced out, discombobulated, emotionally overreactive, you've probably seen that, and struggling to think straight. And you're like, Dysregulation happens to everybody to some degree sometimes, and we all naturally recover from it eventually. And this recovered state is called re-regulation or self-regulation. Now, self-regulation is often used in the context of emotional dysregulation, which is one piece of the pie, emotional. But nervous system dysregulation is not just emotions. It's the endocrine system. It's the immune system. It's blood flow. It's the vital signs. There's a lot of things that are really not under a person's control directly, but they can be calmed using techniques. So the recovered state, it's called re-regulation. And the thing for people who have PTSD from childhood, getting dysregulated can happen a lot more frequently. It can be a lot harder to climb back out of. And so a person who had trauma compared to somebody who doesn't, the traumatized person is probably spending more time dysregulated and having a harder time climbing back out of it. And it's during those dysregulated times that the problems can really get in. Now, it's important to remember the tendency to get dysregulated is not your partner's fault, and it isn't your fault, even if your partner thinks it's your fault when they're upset. Now, everybody does that sometimes, right? We blame other people, but the symptoms you're seeing are just what PTSD looks like when it's not very well under control. And technically, how you deal with your partner's dysregulation could influence how quickly they can get re-regulated. If you just start yelling or threatening to leave, you're not likely to calm things down. So unless you mean it, unless that's really what you want, I'd recommend don't make threats. Don't do things that increase the drama. It just doesn't help. You don't have to be a doormat either. So it's important for you to remember, even if your partner can't see it in the moment, that it's not your fault that their feelings got this intense, and you're not responsible for making it better right now. It's not your fault, and it's not your job. It's the person who has PTSD. It's our job. We've got to learn to re-regulate. We have to. Nobody can regulate our PTSD brains for us. We're the ones who've got to take steps to change it. And we're the ones who have the option of self-control. We also have the option to leave if somebody is just so, destructive to us that we cannot self-regulate. That's where people get into like a no-contact relationship with an ex or perhaps a family member. So as hard as it may be to draw upon when you're feeling the urge to lash out or run away from loved ones, the inner resources are there to calm your symptoms. It's not the fault of the person with CPTSD, but we are the ones who can make the change in here. Okay, that said, here's what you can do. You can support your partner as they try to heal, as they learn to re-regulate. You can ask or suggest that they try to heal. You can suggest they read a certain book or try a certain technique, but you cannot make it happen. Not on your timeline, not against their will, and you can't do it for them. If only you could, right? I get a lot of mails and comments from people who are like, how do I make someone heal? And you can't, but you can offer support and you can suggest things lightly, but you must remember what is needed is understanding, encouragement, and then being willing to step back and detach a little to allow people to make their own decisions and find their own answers. It's genuinely the truth that no one person really knows what another person needs. And I sit here and I teach about this stuff every day of my life, but I never presume to know what another person needs. And so when you do that to a partner, you know what happens. They don't like it. They will pull away. They will shut down. It could delay things for them. Now, you might notice that when your partner is dysregulated, they can go from happy and goofy to overwhelmed and enraged, and then to emotional flatness, like nothing ever happened, all without you ever realizing what set this off. And sometimes they'll be dysregulated without any outward signs. They seem fine, they say they're fine, but then you notice they're not hearing a word you say, or they're tripping over things, or forgetting to show up for appointments. With some people, this brain fog aspect of dysregulation can be really pervasive. And it'll be tempting for you to think they're acting this way intentionally to show you that you're not important to them or they don't respect you. Or you might try to force them to go see an ADHD specialist and take medication. But hold on, because while all of this could be the case, it's most likely just a sign that they're dysregulated. And believe me, I'm telling people like your partner that dysregulation is not an excuse to be rude or inconsiderate. Healing while you're in a couple means two people meeting halfway, and your partner may need to make the effort to show you that they care. And you need to keep in mind that a brain thing might be temporarily blocking the signs of caring that you need to see. Like the emotion is there, but you can't see it on the face. So that's one thing. But maybe the hardest thing about a person with childhood PTSD is that they can be unreasonable. They get upset and you get blamed for things that you have nothing to do with. And I'll tell you a secret. If you keep presenting yourself as someone who has power to fix the PTSD, who has the answers, you will soon be having fights about why you haven't fixed it yet. And I'm going to bet you've had that argument before, maybe many times, where your partner believes that you have the key, because you sort of presented yourself that way, for them feeling better if only you would turn the key. But you won't because you're so mean, right? That's a way of thinking that I call outsourcing responsibility for healing. And I tell people with childhood PTSD to step out of that thinking and own the process. I know, like, we're all at the effect of other people. Other people affect us very much, of course, but we must own the process of our healing and changing how we behave. And I'm telling you, as their partner, let them own it. It's totally okay and appropriate to offer comfort to a person who's in a PTSD response. And consistent love and stability are good things and definitely influence healing. But sometimes what love looks like, if you support a person and give them space to just, day by day, notice how their PTSD symptoms affect them, and let them recalibrate their response. That's what healing can look like. Maybe they're already in my courses for doing this, and that's how you heard about me. You can support your partner while they do the work and still hold a boundary against yucky behavior or abusive behavior that happens when they're dysregulated. So the way to do that is when you notice the symptoms coming on in your partner and they're starting to behave in ways that are making you feel scared or upset, you can take a step back. Your feelings matter. They matter a lot. You are half of this. But your partner who's having CPTSD symptoms right now, this is not a good time to try to talk things out with them or get what you need. You'll get much better results if you wait. And if they're pressing you to talk about their feelings, and we do that sometimes, then say, things are feeling a little intense right now, and I want to talk to you, but I want to wait until things are calmer. Now notice you're not abandoning them. That's a trigger you don't want to set off unintentionally. You're not shutting them down. You're making a plan to communicate in a better way. And if your partner doesn't want to let you do that, you get to do it anyway. Now remember, they're not themselves right now, so it's for you to do the wise thing for yourself. And remember, they will eventually feel calmer, and you can talk then. So what's helped me in my marriage, since I'm the one who gets dysregulated, is that I try to take responsibility to notice when I'm dysregulated, not say much until I can get myself re-regulated. And this is sometimes easier said than done. And the urge to, process the feelings sometimes is overpowering. Now, by process, I mean like talk, and you said this, and you said that, and even when I mask it as I statements, I felt horrible because you were just such a dick. It doesn't, dysregulated talk, it's like drunk talk. Think of it that way, I even tell people, when you're dysregulated, do not drive a car, pull over. If you can't remember, if you're having like blankouts about how you got across the bridge, stop and re-regulate. And that's what I teach. I teach tools to re-regulate quickly, and then also long-term strategies to stay regulated more of the time. But you don't try to have a big major conversation about what's happening or to try to break down some horrible argument that you had while a person is dysregulated. If you really want to have communication, maintaining regulation is everything. It's everything. And so the person with CPTSD, that's the first order of business, is to learn how to do that, how to go slowly enough and gently enough that they can kind of stay lucid and in their body enough to talk about how they're feeling and not have this big emotional flashback come and take over, believing, you're just the worst thing. And you've probably been in that position, where they're just like blowing flame at you. And it's destructive for people with CPTSD to get into that blame place, because so long as we are blaming other people for how we feel, we can't recover. You're just trying to it's like, help me, fix me. Well, other people cannot. It explains so much once you understand that. It's like, oh, they can't. There's things that other people can do to support you. But until a person with CPTSD realizes what an inside job this is to self-regulate, there's going to be so much conflict with partners, so much conflict. So that little codependent dynamic of like, I'm going to help you, honey, I'm going to help you. It can be too much, but support is real. There is a way to support, and it's just like to do your part to keep it from going down that road of yelling, fixing, blaming. All right. So you're using restraint on that side. The person with CPTSD is working on restraint as well and using tools, because ultimately none of us has a license to take out our frustrations on other people. And not even because some of us had bad things happen when we were small that affected us neurologically. It's not a license. It may be an explanation, but it's not an excuse. So here's a summary of things that you can do when your partner is experiencing symptoms. First, you can notice the dysregulation. Sometimes even if you don't say anything, just noting it to yourself, oh gosh, they're dysregulated again. And this can help you stay neutral and even supportive without getting sucked into the drama. Second, you can try to reduce overwhelm for your partner by slowing down, keeping your voice gentle, and not asking a lot of questions or making demands. And again, you don't have to mention that you're doing this. You can just do it and see if it helps. The third thing you can do is mention what you're noticing and ask what they need. You can say, hey, I notice this is making you a bit overwhelmed. Is there anything you need to make this easier? Or you could say, would it help if I gave you a hug right now? Because squeezing hugs can be really helpful, but you want to make sure it's wanted and expected. For a lot of people, a hug, especially out of the blue, it can set off more, it just triggers something. And so you don't want to set off more dysregulation because it can feel constricting, it can feel threatening, it can feel controlling. But at the right time, a squeezing hug can be so comforting to the nervous system. So timing. Then, if things start getting tense, it can help if you get a little space or a tiny bit of separation. And the trick is to do this without setting off an abandonment trigger. So let's say you're on the phone and you can hear your partner getting wound up. It's about to turn into an argument. You can say, "I need 5 minutes apart," and make a concrete plan for when you're going to call them back. And that just 5-minute break can allow both of you to discharge the dysregulation and the anger that was bubbling up. If your partner uses my daily practice techniques of writing and meditating, yes, you can very politely, gently suggest, not demand, that they might want to do that. Or you can do it. You can do the daily practice. It's for everyone, and you can invite them to do it with you. But since any kind of comment about dysregulation nobody wants to be told what to do, but when a person is in a state of dysregulation, getting called out on it it can feel like criticism. Sometimes the kindest thing is to tell a white lie and pretend that you have to go to the bathroom just to get a few minutes apart. Whatever you do, don't resort to giving the silent treatment or storming out or threatening the relationship. Even if you know that you're actually going to leave, which you probably aren't, but even if you are, if that's what you know, announcing it to a dysregulated person is only going to lead to a blow up. So my advice is stay polite, stay kind, stay out of the drama, let the storm pass. Your partner might complain and try to get the conversation started again, but believe me, they will thank you later when their brain and emotions are re-regulated that you stayed calm and sturdy and didn't let things turn into a big fight. Well, people don't always thank you later, but they would if they could see the big picture of the fight that was just averted. Everyone is exhausted after a fight, and arguing can cost a person with childhood PTSD days of dysregulation where they're only quasi-functioning. It can cause people to, forego great opportunities. It can cause them to abandon things that are totally worthwhile. So calm is good. Steadiness is good. Now, I mentioned at the beginning that there is no scenario where you are obliged to put up with abuse, neither at the doormat level or all-out abuse, not emotional, not physical. So I don't care if you're a man or a woman, I don't care who started the argument, you don't deserve abuse. And if it happens, the right thing to do is to remove yourself, with kids, if there are kids, and get to safety. Anything that needs to be worked out can be worked out when things are calmer. And that would be the time to pursue professional help for both of you, for yourself. But for you, if your partner can't or won't control abusive behavior, then it's very sad, but it's not best for you or your kids to be trapped like that. Okay, all that said, if you are blessed enough to have a safe, loving, and supportive relationship, that is just one of the most wonderful healing things that could happen for anyone. And it's a great gift for a person who had trauma as a kid. Not everybody is called to that kind of relationship, and some people are not healed enough yet to pull it off right now. But a good relationship is worth really putting your heart into. It's a good reason to work hard on yourself as a person. If you're a single person with CPTSD who longs for a relationship, keep working on your symptoms. You can become ready for a closer, more safe and stable relationship that's fulfilling for you. If you're with the person with CPTSD, there is hope so long as someone will cooperate with you to start calming the symptoms. So again, my love and appreciation to all of the partners out there who have given that to us and who make the world a loving place for us because of it. I can often predict who in my programs is going to make tremendous progress quickly and start changing their lives, and who is going to hit a wall. And the people who get stuck at the wall are those who are attached to their trauma-driven beliefs. Almost everybody who had childhood trauma, who's working on healing their ability to have healthy romantic relationships, starts out with these beliefs. that it's hopeless, that people are no good, that nothing's ever going to change. And you can see why holding on to these beliefs would not be nearly as effective as going in with an open mind. So for all of you who do want to heal in this part of your life, I want to share this video from my archive that identifies 10 huge trauma-driven beliefs that stop you from being able to change your trauma-driven dating patterns. Here it is. Sometimes the person who is sabotaging your happiness in relationships is not your ex, not your parents, not the people out there who put you down. Sometimes the person sabotaging you is you. And the problem with growing up with neglect and abuse is that it can drive your thinking, it can constrict what you believe is possible for your life, and it can make you see only the worst, only what is ugly. Now, these are what I call trauma-driven beliefs. And you might be holding on to them because you think that they'll protect you. But what they really do is keep you isolated. They lead you away from the good choices and the positive changes and the healthy people who are capable of love. These are the ones you need in your life, right? If you're ever going to overcome what happened to you in the past. Now, it's true that the part of us that's designed to detect good people and to feel love and receive love can get so damaged by early trauma. And the more trauma happens, the greater the risk that we'll get kind of stuck in the pattern, falling only for unavailable people or for people who hurt us, or getting so lost in fantasy that we miss out on any kind of real fulfillment from dealing with real people. But the good news is, healing from past trauma has the potential to completely change the course of your life. And you might be really discouraged about that right now, and you just think, yeah, everybody says that, but how do you actually do that? But I'm here to give you real hope. There really are ways to start healing the wounds of the past, now that we know what their nature is. And if you aren't familiar with my work, you'll find the courses and materials where I teach that in the description section below. But stay with me for right now. You can do that later if you want. Healing begins when you make a decision to question your trauma-driven beliefs. Now, I've had a few miracles in my life. And the one that changed my life the most happened the day that I stopped having crappy relationships. And at the time, I had no idea why the same old hurtful and humiliating problems kept happening. And in fact, they were getting worse, and I couldn't make them stop, even when other things in my life were going well. Now, admitting that my old ideas and behaviors weren't working, like at all, was the very first thing I did that just put a crack in the door, like opened it just a little bit to transformation. And at that time, I was so unhappy, and I was so ashamed of the relationships I kept finding myself in. I could see, how other people were seeing me. And I couldn't really see a way forward. And I'd always thought that if I just met the right guy or looked prettier or changed one small thing about myself, that love could just kind of like show up in my life and do the healing for me. But it had gotten really clear that all my old ideas about how to do relationships had gotten me to that one night where I was so alone and hopeless. And no one was coming to save me. And that if my life was ever going to get better, I was going to have to change. Now, if you've ever had to admit this kind of failure to yourself, you know how, like when you really let it in that like everything you've tried has failed, it actually feels like for a few seconds, it feels like you're going to die. But then, whoop, very quickly, a new feeling fills you up. And it's a sense of surrender and of peace. And then, thank God, possibility and even hope. And everything at this point depends on your willingness to get real and to take action and then keep taking action. Now, negative patterns, I happen to know, are very sticky. They're hard to get rid of. And even when they're gone, they try like hell to come back. And I tell the story of this transformation in my dating course that I mentioned earlier that you can find down in the description section below if you're interested. So when the change in me started to become visible, I think it was very, very obvious to people. And friends were starting to ask me, like, what happened? How did you do that? And they were calling, and I started making appointments with them to show them my techniques. And soon I was sharing my principles with their friends, and people I didn't even know would call me because they heard I could help them break their trauma patterns. And then eventually I started a blog called Crappy Childhood Fairy, then the YouTube channel, and then the courses and the coaching. And this amazing community grew up around it all. And what we do here is we learn to shed trauma-driven beliefs and become open to a new way and a more practical and rational and self-loving way of living our lives. So we learn to heal brain dysregulation, which is really common with CPTSD, and we learn to operate in a regulated state. And I'm telling you, when you're regulated, everything makes sense about why it was so hard before. When you're regulated, it becomes possible to deprogram yourself. And deprogram is a strong word, I know, but deprogramming is exactly what has to happen when we've gotten stuck in an unconscious and repetitive and destructive cycle of behaviors and beliefs. Now, behaviors are at least partly driven by beliefs. And when we have childhood PTSD, a lot of our beliefs came from trauma experiences. Trauma beliefs are cultural, they're family learned, they're reinforced by friends who likely also have childhood PTSD. And we usually know what we're doing wrong, and we can try to make ourselves act normal, right? Normal. But this kind of symptom fixing is usually only temporary. You can't sustain it. Real change demands that we identify those trauma-driven beliefs and begin to replace them. Now, normal people seem to just know this stuff, but those of us programmed by trauma usually need stronger, clearer guidelines. You can't just give us platitudes, it doesn't work. And we can't just talk about things, that doesn't work. And just breathing, all the things that are positive that some people seem to find help so much, like we need more, we who have CPTSD. So what helps, in addition to getting re-regulated, is to have clear guidelines about how you're going to handle certain situations that are triggering for you, that are slippery, right? You set up guidelines in advance, and that might feel at first countercultural, like unnatural or even radical, right? To have rules for yourself. But that is how to deprogram and then reprogram yourself. And it works. And if you want to learn the techniques for that, please do check out the links I shared. But just to help you determine if you might be carrying some of those trauma-driven beliefs that might be blocking you from love, let's talk about 10 of them, okay? Number 1, this is huge. I hear this all the time. I attract unavailable people. It's not a problem, actually, who you attract. I always say, I attract mosquitoes, but I don't sleep with them. The problem is that you are attracted to unavailable people. That's the problem, that you connect with them, attach to them, let them into your life. Whether it's because they're married or addicted or immature or not into commitment or just plain not into you, they are unavailable. And if it happens once, it's really disappointing, right? If it happens again and again and it's your pattern, it's blocking you from any kind of real love. Now, we're often attracted to people who are, whether we see it or not, about the same as we are. It's we who might not be available, really, for the intensity and the risk and the responsibility of being in a real mutual relationship, especially when, our mental engine is racing with dysregulated emotions. So freeing ourselves from the notion that unavailable people just like happen to us, they just fall out of trees and there we are, is the first step of deprogramming. It doesn't just happen. We're attaching to those people, okay? Number 2 is the belief that sex is how you find out if you're compatible. In the post-sexual revolution world, which is where I grew up, this is completely accepted by so many people I know as the way it is. It just is, right? But for people with childhood PTSD, sex can be more often how we bond with people who we don't know yet, before we really know if they're available or compatible with us. And then we're like bonded. And we have abandonment wounds, so we can't leave. And so we waste years trying to retroactively turn that person into who we hoped they were in the first place. We probably discovered like a couple days in that that's not what it was. So recovery sometimes means living by a different, more careful set of rules that helps us avoid those same old mistakes. And I call those the guardrails. And personally, I used and I teach a way of dating in a structured way so that you can know and be in touch with your own values and what's in your best interest, and prevent some of the stuff that happens when you're dysregulated or triggered from happening. You just kind of know what that's going to be, and you can set a guardrail against it. Like if I find myself trying to call more than once a day after the first date, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to like put my phone under the sofa. That's a guardrail. Because romance can make it really hard to think rationally about who to let into your life, especially if you have CPTSD. Number 3, another belief, you've probably been told this: I am always exactly where I'm supposed to be. Now, I do get the basic idea that even hard times can help us grow, but it can also be a total rationalization that's used by people who are in abusive, rejecting, or intolerable relationships to explain why they can't or won't leave, and to perpetuate a fantasy that actually they're loved on some unseen level. And in fact, it's often an abuser who has drilled that into their minds. But other variations of that kind of magical thinking are, I know that this person is terrible to me, but we had this incredible past life together, or God told me to just love them through this, or we're here to learn a lesson from each other. They're my teacher, right? Have you heard this? It's very difficult for most people to face the truth of their lives, especially when they're in a rut and when they're feeling lonely. Having a good friend, having a mentor in this area can be so helpful so that you can avoid all those old mental traps, because they can call you on it. They can say, yoo-hoo, I think you might be doing that thing again. And when you've made the decision that you're ready to change, then you're going to seek out that help. You're not going to avoid help. You're not going to try to hide from everybody. You're going to find the help. You're ready to be lovingly called on that kind of magical thinking. That's what helps, is to go, oh, right. That's not true. Okay, carry on. All right, number 4, here's a belief. When a partner has been avoidant or not faithful or rejected you, and you think to yourself, well, probably that's understandable because they were hurt before and they have CPTSD, and that's why they're afraid of commitment. Okay, that could be true, but whatever a person's history, if they are unable or unwilling to love you and be with you, there it is. They're not partner material. They're not available. Now, understanding or trying to guess at the source of their feelings still won't get you loved. Moving on is sometimes the most direct route to finding love. Did you know that? You break up, you just became like that much closer to finding the one, because this one's not it. All right. So here's another thing I hear people say to rationalize staying with, hurtful people. Well, they had a lot of childhood trauma and that's why they self-medicate. So here's the truth. All alcoholism or drug addiction is self-medication. That's what alcohol and drugs are for, to medicate feelings, right? To feel better for people who feel bad. And for a little while it works, and after a while it causes a lot of problems that make people feel really bad, not just them, but everybody around them. But then it becomes necessary to them. Whatever you call it, self-medication, it's not some like special category that's workable. Addiction is addiction, alcoholism is alcoholism. I always recommend Al-Anon. It's a 12-step program for relatives and friends of alcoholics if you need help getting clearer thinking around that. But whatever you call it, serious drinking and using make a person unreliable, limited in terms of intimacy, possibly dangerous, and just flat out not a good dating prospect. So when it's a close family member or a spouse that's got substance problems, there are more compelling reasons to stay in their lives. But either way, it's really important to set your own boundary. Like, do not rationalize what they're doing. Okay, number 6. I realized that my ex is an abusive narcissist, and I want to send them a book I found on Amazon about abusive narcissists. Now, I know firsthand it is so hard to stop fixing people as a means to get control over an out-of-control situation, or to rationalize why you're not getting love. But if you're diagnosing an ex as a sick and terrible person, and you think that you should therefore go spend money and time thinking about them and making contact in order to help them, your trauma brain is doing the thinking, okay? Being honest with a mentor has the power to break the spell and set you free to keep living your life without that person. All right. Number 7, we're just friends. We're just friends. Just friends. How many just friends have you had? How many times have you been with somebody who had some just friends and it caused you intense jealousy and pain? There are, in fact, relationships where exes can be friends. It's possible. But there are many where one person is pining away for the other one and is too scared to declare their feelings because it would be icky to the other person and they'd go away. Or B, one or both of you is using the other person to fill up time until real love shows up, pretending that the new significant others, they're just going to love those friends too. Well, they won't. They're not going to like you being kind of slightly emotionally entangled with people. That's not emotional availability. And healthy people can feel it. It's all sort of a crappy dynamic, and it puts up a sort of force field around you that telegraphs to them that you are not available. So people who would make good partners can intuitively sense that force field and they stay away. The only ones who get through it are the unavailable ones, the jerks, the people who are high. They don't even sense the force field at all. Healthy people are looking for that bright, shiny availability and they know how to recognize it. Number 8, I need closure. Have you ever said that? Have people said it to you? Now, this makes total sense to the trauma-driven mind, but in real life, it means I'm making up an excuse to reconnect. I want another shot at this. So you know what I'm going to say. There are cases where there was a serious relationship or a marriage and somehow one person never found out why it ended. And I would say eventually having a conversation about that might be important. But closure usually is only going to be a slippery slope to get you entangled back in the very thing that's making you emotionally unavailable and unhappy because it's with an unavailable person. 9, that person is toxic. All right, there's toxic stress, there's toxic emotions, but the concept of a toxic person, and I get it, like I have people that I feel that way about, like I just sort of fill up with dread and horror and anger around them. But in fact, people, no matter how they behave, they're not actually like radioactive, they're not a virus. They can't hurt you just by being around. It's that being around them causes a toxic reaction because you know what? You have been in the presence of really horrible people just screaming at you on the street. I don't know, where I live, we have people who do that. And it's something you want to get away from, but it's not deeply destructive. It doesn't make you, break your heart because it's not true. So this belief in a toxic person, I think it's much more helpful to understand that the toxicity is happening in the PTSD reaction that it sets off in you, which is not your fault, but that is toxic to you. When you fill up with the dysregulated emotions, that adrenaline, that fight or flight or flee or fawn response, now you're in toxicity. It's you who, in a sense, has become the toxic person. You're poisoned, okay? So when we're around people who trigger us that badly, they might be very terrible, but it's always a dance with them. So if nothing else, your part in it that you can control is that you dance with them and you don't have to. And you basically got triggered by their behavior. And I'm not saying it wasn't bad behavior, but it caused you to get emotionally dysregulated and lose your balance. It's more realistic to acknowledge that you have a toxic reaction around certain behaviors and that it's actually possible to become, neutral to people who are selfish or manipulative or abusive. Don't get neutral to abusive people, but just people who are, just very, very unpleasant. Abusive people, you really just have to, there's a whole line of action that you have to take around that to sever it, including calling law enforcement. But I'm talking about people who are, very cruel, very demanding, telling lies, that sort of thing. It's you who's got to learn to have the boundaries around them and decide whether or not to have them in your company. And when you have that boundary, you'll find that you're not poisoned, all right? There are no good men or good women or good marriages. I hear that all the time. I used to think this is true, that all good men were taken and I'd better just stay stuck in a crappy relationship. But this too was a justification. I think it's common to feel that way after somebody has really, really hurt you, and it just seems like everybody's like that out there. But I'm telling you, it's not true. You're not like that, right? Having believed that for a long time, I'm really sorry I wasted so many years on this kind of trauma-driven thinking, because really what it does it telegraphs to other people that you're prickly, that you're hurt, and it pushes away good people. So with the good people pushed away, the only people I had relationships with were people who were not so good to me, not good for me. And then I'd be wondering, like, why does this keep happening? I must just attract these jerks. But that's what it was. That's what it was. And I was carrying my trauma as a way of expressing myself in the world. And it just wasn't that pretty. It wasn't sexy. Now, sometimes you have to shed the bad relationships before you can see the good things that are possible for you, because the bad relationships are the very thing reinforcing your trauma-driven beliefs. It just keeps making it feel truer and truer. So I'm saying question your beliefs and take heart. Become open and willing. Like, you may not be able to manufacture this transformation in yourself on command, but start taking the first steps. Be open and willing to see things in a new way. If you catch yourself thinking everybody's bad and nothing is possible, catch yourself and say, wait a minute, that can't possibly be true. That's probably my trauma-driven thinking. Remember, healing is possible.